What's up? Welcome back to another video. My name is Chels, and if you are struggling to lose weight on a plant-based diet and you are wanting to learn how to get consistent, then this is the channel for you. I just need to acknowledge that I am seriously craving sushi right now, and it is because I've eaten hardly anything today because I've been super busy. We're going to be talking about cravings, what they are, how to deal with them, how your brain actually works, and why you form associations with certain foods and all that good stuff. And at the very end of the video, I'm going to be sharing 3 very practical tips that you can implement right now today that are going to help you manage your cravings so much better. So what exactly is a craving? A craving is defined as an intense desire for a specific food. We all know what that's like, especially when you're hungry and you just want to eat that exact food, whatever it is. So we often think that cravings are about that specific food, but in reality, a craving is just about alleviating a current situation. So all a craving is that you become unsatisfied with your current state and you think that that specific item, that specific food is going to alleviate that feeling. So it's a desire for a change in your feelings. The biggest problem of cravings is not that you get them. I'm going to tell you straight away, you're probably not going to ever fully eliminate cravings. The problem is that you probably give into them more than you would like to, and that's the reason that you're watching this video. We will talk about some practical ways for reducing the effects of a craving, but to start with, let's look at what actually happens in your brain from the moment that you have a craving to when you are downing an entire bag of potato chips. So this has to do with how your brain forms habits. And when you hear the word habit, you probably think of something like brushing your teeth or maybe going to the gym in the morning. Most people don't have the gym habit. I'm trying to form the gym habit. It's not an easy one, but really all a habit is a sequence of events that happen when you experience a certain cue and then you complete a certain action. It's your brain's way of putting your actions on autopilot, and it starts with a cue, a craving, then a response, and a reward. So a practical example of how this works could be where you open the fridge and you see some cake in there. When you see that cake, this is a very personal, relevant experience for me because my mum came the other day and it was my daughter's birthday. She made this amazing cake and she left a lot of it here for my daughter to eat. I personally don't eat the cake, but for a few days, the cue would happen when I would open the fridge and right there at eye level is the cake. As soon as I see the cake, the cue begins. The habit formation and what I want to happen, this idea that I want to alleviate the feeling that I'm currently in, which is cakeless, begins. Now the craving kicks in and I want to eat the cake. The craving starts. And now the response in this situation could be that I actually did eat the cake. I didn't, amazingly. But in that instance, after you have eaten the cake, which is the response, you get the reward, which is the satisfaction of eating that cake. You are able to satisfy the craving that you had for a cake. And that's how all habits work. Good habits and bad habits are all formed with this cue, craving, response, and reward sequence. So the reason that your brain forms habits is that they serve 2 functions. The first one being that it satisfies the craving, and the second one being that it's taught you that with a certain cue, this is now a good action to complete because you get that dopamine hit. Over time, you will have created very strong associations with certain cues. Remember, once they start, this is the sequence your brain wants to take, and this is why it's so incredibly hard to break habits. So when you first form a habit, you don't actually know that you are going to get a reward. It's normally by accident. If you think about animals who are taught to push down a lever and then get food, initially that's an accident, but over time they learn that the more they push down that lever, the more they get the reward, which is the food delivered into their mouths. In essence, this is what you learn to do with your cue, craving, response, and reward. The real reason you get the reward is not because the cake necessarily tastes amazing, it's that you get that dopamine hit, or you did initially. This is the fascinating thing about habit formation. In the beginning of forming a habit, the way that you solidify it is your brain will give you a dopamine hit at that reward section. Once you have formed a habit, you don't get the reward in terms of the dopamine hit when you actually get the cake, when you get the reward. You get that dopamine hit at the cue, as soon as you think about it. It's almost like your brain anticipates that you're going to be getting the reward and then penalizes you when you don't, because you get a dip if you do not fulfill the response that your brain is expecting. If you delay the gratification, your brain, when you actually do give in and eat that food, is going to give you another dopamine hit, almost to reinforce that it was a good behavior and you should go back to doing it. You're not screwed, okay? There is some practical ways that you can deal with this. It's not necessarily a willpower issue. It's not that you're a failure. It's not that you lack motivation. There's a lot of things that are contributing to you getting cravings and then giving into them. This is how our bodies function. It's how we are designed to really learn about what works in our environment. The problem is that highly processed food gives you a huge dopamine hit, much more than any other kind of food. Processed food has been manufactured and engineered with millions of dollars behind it to get you to that bliss point. That's the industry term for the maximum amazing amount of saltiness without being too salty, and sweetness and crunchiness. All of these things that make you go, I just want to have a little bit more. You are fighting literally millions of dollars when you are fighting your cravings. So we've got these huge rewards, which is this dopamine hit from these bliss point foods, and then we've got cues that range from hunger to boredom to getting your period to seeing an advertisement to smelling a certain smell to going out with certain people to certain times of nights and everything in between. So when it comes to being able to manage your cravings effectively and not give in to them all the time, any effective strategy is going to look at how habits form. It's going to address it at the cue, the craving, the response, or the reward. Here are 3 very practical ways to do just that, and you can implement them right now. Number 1 is to hide processed food, or ultimately get junk food out of your environment. James Clear in his book Atomic Habits says that environment is the hidden hand that shapes human behavior. So remember what you learned about a cue. If you can remove some of the cues, if you can minimize those cues, you do not start that habit sequence. So therefore you remove that going into being a craving. So the ideal situation is to get these high bliss point, high trigger foods for you outside of your environment so that you do not get the cues. It's not possible for everyone, but you can do something in between, all right? What I do is I get that stuff out of sight, out of mind. It was real interesting because last week when my mum bought this cake, I was opening the fridge every day and seeing the cake. I got so sick of it because every single time I was like, I want to eat this cake so bad. I decided to hide it at the back of the fridge. I didn't even get it out. I just hid it behind some other things. You know what? I forgot that it was there and it went moldy. Studies have found that there isn't a huge difference in the amount of will people that power genetically have. Okay, there's not a huge difference in the genetical willpower difference of humans. What is different is that some people, disciplined people, set up their environments in a disciplined way. Another example of this is that I will often delete Instagram or put my phone in another room when I'm trying to do work because I know my weaknesses. I know that when I look at my phone or that cue of being bored just sends me on this desire to alleviate that by checking my Instagram. So I get that out of my environment. There's lots of creative ways that you can do this, but the most basic principle is eliminate the cues so that you do not get the craving, or at least minimize them. The second tip is to don't expect to beat cravings when you are hungry. Hunger is a huge cue. Automatically it's a cue because it sets you on this path where you want to alleviate that feeling of hunger with some kind of food. What you decide you want to fill that with is probably dependent on many other cues, but if you alleviate that hunger and if you eliminate the hunger, you minimize the craving dramatically. I did an interview last week with Spudfit, who is such an awesome guy. He's lost, I think, 120 pounds, and he did an entire year eating potatoes only. He told me a story of being in a McDonald's car park, wanting to go in and buy a burger, and he had this huge pot of potatoes or bowl of potatoes right next to him. He told himself that he could go in and buy the burger as long as he ate this big container of potatoes first. Well, guess what? He ate the potatoes, satisfied his hunger, no longer had the cravings, and used that strategy the entire year and beyond, that he was able to eat only potatoes. Remember how I talked about a craving as just wanting to alleviate a feeling of not being satisfied with your current state, right? You want to eat cake because you realize that you have a cake void. So when you have a craving for a specific food, you think that the only way you're going to be able to alleviate that feeling is with that specific food, but that's not actually true. There are many foods that will alleviate that feeling. You just think it's something specific. So my suggestion to you is, when you have those intense cravings, satisfy your hunger with the foods that you want to eat. Make sure that you are eating enough carbohydrates, especially things like potatoes and whole grains, beans and vegetables. Have a big meal of that. See if you still want to eat that burger or eat that cake. Get really full, and I can guarantee you that that craving is going to be hugely minimized. The third tip is to anticipate your cravings based on your past experiences and your past cues. So an example of this would be, probably by now, that when you get your period, you are going to have more cravings around that time. But it's funny because we know we're going to get more cravings around our period, but we don't really plan for it. It's like, now I've got a craving. I have no idea what to do. It's like, you knew this was coming. So anticipate that it is going to happen and create a contingency plan. So what I do in those situations is, I know that I'm going to be wanting to eat more high calorie food, more comfort foods during my period, or if I'm emotional, and I plan for that. I have specific meals like noodles loaded with veggies, or a bit more of a creamy pasta still with tons of veggies to lower the calorie density. I have those meals as backup plans for if I get those cravings. I truly believe that one of the biggest issues with cravings and the fact that we create these really, really strong associations is that we think a certain food is the only thing that's going to alleviate that, and then we confirm that to our brain over and over and over again by going for that food. What if you change the narrative? What if the next time you are craving a pizza, you actually made a homemade pizza, like a better version of it? What would that teach your brain about satisfying the craving with something else? What if the next time you wanted to buy a greasy burger and chips, what if you went and got sushi, tons of veggies in it, maybe some edamame on the side? This not only is a lower calorie option, it's actually teaching yourself that you can make decisions in spite of wanting to do something different, that you are able to make a decision that is contrary to what you absolutely want. Feeling like you are making progress is so important when it comes to improving your consistency. The more that you can feel like you have made good decisions, the more you trust yourself, the more you are capable of making better decisions, even in spite of cravings or difficult situations and difficult cues. And especially when you pre-plan what you're going to do and you get that food organized for a time when those feelings arise, you're sorted, or at least you're improving. So some other ways that I do this is I will bring healthy treats and snacks with me when I'm going out to visit friends, because I know that if their food is sitting there, the food that I don't want to eat, I'm going to want to eat it. I know that I can mostly satisfy that feeling by having my own version, which maybe is a bit of a treat for me and definitely wouldn't be for them, but it's able to satisfy that cue and that craving with something that I actually feel good about. The most important thing here is that you actually put something in place to help you deal and cope with your cravings better. So my challenge to you is to decide right now which of these three you are going to implement in your life, whether that be changing your environment so that you reduce the cues, whether that is having a bit of a contingency plan for when you know you're going to experience strong cravings, or making sure that you are really full before you give in to cravings and that you're actually eating enough food so that you minimize their effect. Let me know in the comments which one of these you are going to implement. If you found this video helpful and you want to know more about proven methods of behavioral change when it comes to diet, then definitely check out my video course, Lean with Plants. We do an enrollment 4 times a year, so you can get on the waitlist for that. You can also check out my podcast where I dive really deep into the psychology of human change and how to implement this with a healthy plant-based diet. All of that information on my podcast is completely free, and I put out new episodes every single week. You can also check out this video that I made about how to get out of an all-in or all-out diet mentality. Tends to go hand in hand with cravings. Go check that out, and I will see you in another video next week. Bye!